Paula, can you hear us?
Okay, it seems to be working now. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't have panelist privileges until a few seconds ago. Thank you very much, Licious, and welcome everyone to this afternoon's webinar. Thank you for putting aside the time to be here. I don't want to take up too much time in the intro, but really speaking, this afternoon, the GPC Secretariat team at UNAIDS headquarters wanted to present to you the results of the country responded survey that a number of you will have taken part in. And this is a survey that we do to see how far countries are in implementing an HIV prevention strategy as set forth in the HIV Prevention Roadmap 2025, which, as some of you will recall, was launched by the GPC and partners exactly a year ago today. Actually, it was July last year. And following that, because it contains an action plan with 10 key strategic action points that we feel are really the basis of successful HIV prevention programming, we also devised this country respondent survey as a way of tracking progress in these HIV prevention strategic actions, and if we do it in a comparable way, to be able to compare one of each of us with the other to see how we are all doing, see where the gaps are in the strategic actions in the countries and where improvements can be made. So the team will present, give an overview on why the survey was done. I've just outlined how the survey was done, what some of the highlight results are, and hopefully we have some time at the end for a limited collective reflection and looking ahead at what we can do with these survey results, survey findings. So it's a real pleasure to be sharing these with you because the surveys were done by countries. Let me also take the time once again to thank the country teams who helped, because a number of you are here. We've already done that. We've greatly thanked particularly the National AIDS Council stakeholders who helped us, but also our country offices, both UNAIDS and WHO, some of the National AIDS Control Program partners, and selected implementing partners. So back to you, Licious. Let's get into first an introduction of the roadmap action plans that the Global Prevention Coalition proposes, and then the country survey results.
Thank you so much, Paula. And before I hand over to Clemens to give the first part of this webinar on the overview of the roadmap actions and some framing around that to remind ourselves of those 10 actions in the document, I just want to give you some quick housekeeping here. This webinar is being simultaneously interpreted into French, Portuguese, and Spanish. On your Zoom window, just look for that globe looking like icon. Click on that and select your language of preference. We are recording this session. We'll share the recording as well as the slides that will be presented during this webinar. Let us all engage. There are two engaging functions on this webinar. There's one which is the Q&A function. Let's use that function to post questions to the panelists. We'll be going through that Q&A function to respond to your questions. And then let's separate and post other engaging content via the chat. Let's make it an engaging discussion. Let's share through the normal chat. And for specific questions, let's use the Q&A function so that it's easy to track your questions and respond to them. And again, thank you all for joining. Let's engage. Over to you, Clemens.
Thank you, Lysias, and welcome, colleagues, also from my side to this webinar. And great to see you all. Many of you will have seen the roadmap and presentations on the roadmap before. So what we're going to do today is actually just look at the roadmap from the angle on how is it relevant to the baseline survey, and what's the background actually in the roadmap that informed the baseline survey. So first of all, just looking forward, we need to understand what will success look like. And the roadmap actually set out, based on the political declaration that was agreed at the level of heads of state and the global AIDS strategy, to achieve fewer than 370,000 new infections by 2025. And that is more than 80% reduction compared to 2010, if you'd like to translate it into a metric that's also relevant for a country process. So 80% reduction, more than 80% reduction, actually 82.5 to be precise, compared to 2010 is the overall goal that we'd like to achieve. And that is related to a target on 95% of people at risk using appropriate, prioritized, effective combination prevention. And in order to achieve that, there's obviously, and these are just the high-level results, we need to do a lot of detailed and practical work to develop people-centered, precise prevention responses. And this is really what the roadmap is about. It provides those concrete actions, and the survey then is the instrument to measure that. Let me just remind ourselves that we have actually here a long way to go across different countries, with some countries actually having made great progress and being on track, 4 actually, or 5 actually being on track as of last year's data to achieve the 2025 target. Now, if we look at the different results that we have here, and you remember.
Sorry, Clemens, to interrupt. It looks like the slides are not showing.
They're not showing? Okay.
No.
Yes. Can you try to reshare?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Lysias. Colleagues, okay, so I was just showing actually, the overall results we want to achieve through the coalition and the background in these global documents, Prevention Roadmap, Global AIDS Strategy, and the political declaration, and then the trends in new infections, actually the declines we see that are varying greatly. So that's the 2 slides that I had before. Now, in terms of national prevention program reviews and how we can actually assess progress in prevention, we have a fairly broad range of tools. And the target we talked about, that target fewer than 370,000 new infections, so 80% incidence reduction, is actually the highest level target. And we have the HIV estimates to track progress against that. So new infection estimates, or in some countries, specific surveys like FIA are being done. Then we have the outcomes. You remember 95% use of prevention, combination prevention services. And we have the global AIDS monitoring based on population-based surveys for measuring those higher level outcomes. Then we also track program coverage through the global AIDS monitoring, but more importantly at country level through program data, in some cases also survey data on who was reached with programs. So all these instruments are already there. And then we have, and many of you know this, a national reporting of policies and commitments, the NCPI, where we also report on policy and structural barriers. So this is just to explain that the survey, the roadmap survey we are talking about, is not duplicating any of that. The roadmap survey really looks very specifically at the prevention stewardship, the 10 actions of the coalition that are outlined in the roadmap, and what countries really practically do. That's why some of the other things, the higher level policy questions that are in the national commitments and policy instrument are not repeated in the roadmap survey. So the roadmap survey is really about what we're doing practically in implementing a 10-step plan. And of course you have, and you see that here, for other areas of programs, you have the PSATs for all the different prevention pillars, and you have other prevention needs assessment tools for each of the pillars as well. Now, just to remind you, we have the prevention scorecard. So they summarize the coverage of programs, the outcomes of programs in these kind of summary tables, and they are different from, the survey results on the 10-step actions that colleagues will present after this in much more detail. And then for each country, we have these scorecards. And as you remember last time, and we'll do that again, this year we'll integrate then in a poster format the scorecard results, which you see here, and the survey results. So in the end, you will have everything in one place in the prevention scorecard. So the HIV estimates that you see here in the line chart on the new infections, the outcomes, which is the use of prevention services, condom, PrEP, or harm reduction services, and then the coverage. All of that comes together with the survey result then in the next scorecard, which will be then issued in the coming months. Now, important, or everything that's in the survey, even though the survey is organized around the 10 actions, should be aligned to also the thematic priorities, meaning the key populations and the priority populations of the roadmap, and then the thematic pillars, condom programming, ARV-based prevention, and others like harm reduction or VMMC integrated into the other pillars. So the survey specifically looks at the stewardship element of the response, which is the 10 actions in the roadmap, and those reflect the large underlying gaps in the prevention response. And in the coalition, we also always clustered them in 4 areas: limited political leadership, policy and structural barriers, limited prevention financing, and limited implementation at scale are the broad headings. And then in the roadmap, actually, you have the 10 steps outlined that guide specific actions to strengthen prevention stewardship. And just as for this big map of tools available that we showed before, it's not that all countries actually have to implement or should implement them in the same way. This is really a template and the structure that should be used and adjusted at country level. And that's why in this roadmap, actually, you see in a lot of the 10 steps, there's not necessarily globally defined milestones. There's opportunity to define milestones at country level, and then also the tracking through the survey can be specific to those milestones that you set in line with the 10 actions. But of course, there's some globally suggested milestones as well that are in the roadmap and that are being tracked in the survey. So just to summarize the 10-point action plan, and the survey presentations will go into much more detail than on this. The first 3 are really around getting from data to precise programs and then clearly defined investment. So it's about data-driven assessments, first of all, of program needs, but also the barriers, structural and policy barriers. The second one is this more precise, more granular, more differentiated approach to prevention that is also reflected in the global targets. The third one is really taking this into a costed operational plan, really define the investment needs of countries very clearly. And then we have another group of actions that relate more to the actual leadership, stewardship, and enabling environment. So there's another 4 actions on that. One is really the strengthened leadership entities needed to actually have a strong prevention response, which is never just a single player. So really requires this pulling together of different community government and partner organizations. Then we have 1 action on community-led prevention being strengthened, 1 action on removing social and legal barriers to prevention services, both for key and priority populations, and then an integration of HIV prevention into related services as an element of strengthening sustainability of the response as well. And then we have 1 action that is very specific on new prevention technologies, and that's really the broad set of ARV-based technologies, plus of course also innovative delivery modalities such as virtual interventions and use of new media technologies for expanding the reach of prevention programs. And then we have 2 actions that relate more to the monitoring and accountability. Monitoring becoming more real-time is 1 strategic shift proposed by the roadmap, and accountability to be strengthened. And accountability is not about having a scorecard or a survey or having a tool. Accountability was defined in this roadmap really very clearly as a process using the findings from the monitoring, from the scorecards or whatever tools you have available from the survey, and using them for better decision making, and really holding each other, everybody in the response, holding each other accountable for the results. And the roadmap very specifically proposes against those 4 barriers that we mentioned, to have accountability mechanisms, getting together with political leaders on accountability every year, getting together around legal and policy barriers with lawmakers and policymakers, getting together with leaders in the financing of health to discuss prevention financing regularly based on what we are finding. And then do the same in terms of really annual performance review of the national program, not just a specific grant or a specific project, but bringing together the national prevention response and really looking at the data together and see how far have we gone in achieving the targets. So accountability is really defined in a new way. And I've just spent a few more sentences on it because we also want to prioritize this based on the survey results that you'll see in a moment. So I think from this, we can move directly back to Lysias and the actual survey results. Clearly, they show that there is a lot of progress in some areas and gaps, and the details will follow from Lysias.
Thank you so much, Clemens, for providing that that overview and a reminder of what's in the roadmap document. If we can stop sharing. So again, hello to everyone. I'll go through some details around the results of the survey, basically looking at the methodology that we used to analyze the responses and some summary results. And as mentioned by Clemens, I'm Lisa Zembe. I'm part of the Global HIV Prevention Coalition Secretariat here at UNAIDS in Geneva. Clemens has already given this background, so I'll skip that slide. So before we get to the actual presentation, I'm curious if we can answer these 2 very quick questions. It's a Mentimeter. If you can go on menti.com and then you enter that code there, 36509859. I'm just curious to have some responses to these quick questions, if we can respond to them quickly. Just 2 quick questions. You can also scan the barcode that is at the top right corner there. If you want to type the whole menti.com URL, you can just scan the barcode at the top there, and then respond to this question. Let's just spend 4 minutes to do this, and then we go to the presentation. Yes, thank you. That's very quick. Good to see. Menti.com, and then you enter that code, or you just scan on your phone that barcode, and respond to these quick questions. So the first one is asking, where exactly are you based? Are you at the country level? Are you from the government, NAC, MOH, or any other government department? Or are you from one of the UN agencies? It could be UNAIDS, UNFPA, WHO, UN Women, UNDP, UNICEF, UNESCO, etc. Are you from any of the civil society organizations, or you are from one of the partners, including donor partners, or you are from at the global level, you are not based at the country level? Thank you for those who have already responded. I'll give 30 more seconds on this one, and then we'll go to the next one. Menti.com, and the code is 365098959. Or you can just scan the barcode at the top right corner there, and then you respond. Okay, thank you. Looks like we've got some kind of representation across all those different categories there. Responses are still coming. Thank you. Almost 30 seconds to go. Menti.com, then the code is 365098959. Or you can scan with your phone the barcode at the top right corner, and then you respond to the questions. Okay, thank you so much. Let's get to the next question, which is going to be segmented based on the responses to this question. So the next one is asking, what was your involvement in the HIV prevention roadmap baseline survey? If we may respond to this one as well quickly. We'll give it 1.5 minutes. It's still the same code. Okay, interesting. Great to see people were part of the group that responded to the survey. Also interesting to see that there were some who were not aware of this survey before this webinar. So this is an opportunity to strengthen our collaboration here. I hope this webinar will be informative for that. Thank you for the responses. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, we'll discuss how maybe we can move that gray bar to the middle bar there. Would love to see across the different sectors, different organizations, everyone pulling into making contribution to this piece of work. Thank you so much for your quick responses. I'm moving on now to the presentation. Clemens has already given us, this is the end goal, to reach 370,000 annual new HIV infections, and we have a roadmap to do that. Clemens has already presented this. This is just a shortened version of the same roadmap. So how did we conduct this roadmaps? Why did we conduct a roadmap survey? Clemens has already also given some highlights or some insights into why we do it as part of accountability, as part of tracking to see where we are. So we did this survey to document where countries are at in relation to the 10-point action plan of the 2025 HIV prevention roadmap. And another reason is to highlight where progress has been made, but at the same time also highlighting where gaps are still remaining. And as we know, or most of us know, the GPC is a platform for cross-learning. So doing this kind of an assessment across different countries, it helps to see which countries are doing better in which areas, and we can facilitate cross-learning so that others can learn from others where they're not doing great. And how was the survey conducted? We conducted the survey, so a questionnaire was shared to the 20 GPC countries plus 6 new GPC countries. That is the total of 34 countries that received the questionnaire. And the second bullet there with the list of sub-bullets is showing you how widely this questionnaire was shared. It was sent to the UNAIDS country directors and their HIV prevention focal points. Also, UNFPA, as you know, or as most of you would know, UNFPA is a co-convener of the GPC. So the questionnaire was also shared with UNFPA representatives, or the equivalent of country directors in their HIV prevention focal points. It was shared with the National AIDS Commission directors and their HIV prevention focal points as the HIV prevention leadership entities in countries. Also shared with the Ministry of Health HIV prevention focal points. In some countries, these are the HIV prevention leadership entities, depending on the context and of each country. It was also shared with our regional directors as well as UNFPA regional directors as well. One response was required, or it was compiled by the technical working group from each country under the leadership of the HIV prevention leadership entity in country. So one survey response was submitted by the 34 countries. Responses were received between 15 March and 12 May, and then we took some time to do back and forth with countries where we had some questions to clarify and do the analysis that we're going to be showing now, the results. The idea of this presentation also is to share with you our approach, or the approach that we use to analyze these results, so that we can have an agreement ahead of publishing these results in a GPC report sometime this year. This slide is just giving a summary of the structure of the questionnaire that was used. The questionnaire was sent as a Word document and also as a SurveyMonkey link. And the questions were really trying to drill into the 10 roadmap actions. So we try to make it as short as possible, but at the same time, providing enough detail that can give us an idea about where each country is at for each of the 10 roadmap action items. For example, if you look, shown with the blue highlight there is a question relating to the roadmap action point 2 about precision prevention. It will ask if a country has got a strategy in place, if the strategy is costed, or if the strategy is already there as part of a national strategic planning for the country, and if it is aligned to the global AIDS strategy or to the 2025 roadmap. It was a short questionnaire, as I mentioned earlier on, 45 main questions. Most of them are multiple choice questions to make it easy to respond to, and some of them with some text-based boxes to substantiate the multiple choice options. We also identified some key questions. We thought it would be important to have milestones set up. So we included a few questions where milestones were being asked to indicate or to substantiate some of the responses being provided in the multiple choice questions. And you will see this when I'll be showing you the analysis methodology to this survey. This is slide just showing a summary of response rate from the different countries. Out of the 33 countries managed to respond, with the remaining one, which is a GPC country, still going through the discussions in the country around the GPC processes. So a very good response rate from all countries on this survey. I'll go through now how we analyze this result, showing you the scoring matrix first for the 10 actions, and then I'll go into the summary results. The idea of the scoring matrix was to really allow each and every component of the question feeding into each roadmap action to contribute to the overall score. For example, action 1 it speaks to conducting a data-driven assessment of HIV prevention program needs and barriers. And under this action, we had several questions, and the three key questions we had were to do with if a country has managed to provide a prevention response epidemic pattern analysis, if there have been any consultation meetings conducted to identify barriers, and if those barriers have been listed. So first, the epidemic analysis, we thought it would weigh more. So we thought this will contribute 50% to the overall scoring of this roadmap action. And then the remaining two components, which is conducting consultation meetings and identifying barriers and listing those barriers, will contribute 25% each. So you will see when we show the results how you contributed to this based on your response to this part of the roadmap action. The next roadmap action number 2 was to, it speaks to adopting a precision prevention approach for different priority populations, as well as developing HIV prevention goals aligned with the 2025 targets. These had several questions, which we thought they were very important to contribute to the overall score. So first was to develop a strategy, second, to set prevention targets, and then translating those targets into subnational targets, and then developing differentiated prevention packages for different key and priority populations. And we also went ahead to ask questions around adolescent girls and young women where it is relevant, as well as the development of standard operating procedures to guide implementation at country level for the different and relevant pillars. You can see in the column saying scoring, this is how the weighting was. So you'll find that if a country had maybe 2 or 3 of these components, their overall score will be an addition of the respective scores in that third column, written scoring. This will allow overall to say, you'll be able to know which is the missing piece if you are to achieve a precision prevention approach at the country level that is aligned to your 2025 targets. Now that you have an idea about how this scoring was done, I'll just go through quickly the remaining 8 actions that I get to the actual presentation. For the third roadmap action, defining country investment needs, this required budgeted or costed HIV prevention plan, as well as conducting or having a dialogue to address HIV prevention funding gap. So to have the plan in place, we thought it would weigh more, and then having a dialogue with the relevant partners, you see in the results which of those partners were invited by the different countries. We thought it would weigh almost 50%. And then reinforcing HIV prevention leadership with a multi-sectoral collaboration, oversight, and management. This is a very, very important aspect of HIV prevention response. It's also highlighted earlier on by Clemens in his overview. This was split into 3 components. Multi-sector HIV prevention leadership exists, that is this, an entity that is coordinating HIV prevention. And then that entity, we thought of asking some questions speaking to how functional it is. As a starting point, we thought having meetings is important. And it's important to note here that we did not consider just small general meetings or subgroup meetings for this. We thought it would be really meetings to go through HIV prevention response at the country level, not small meetings that happen in subgroups. And then the development of milestones to reinforce that entity's function in country, contributing those scores as shown in the third scoring column. Strengthening community-led HIV responses and setting up of social contracting mechanisms. There were quite a number of components here, 5 of them. First of all, convening the government, convening the relevant communities, including key populations, young people, implementing partners and funding, and also assessing whether public funds are being allocated to NGOs and community-led services, and also if there are any laws or policies impacting community organizations, and if there are any targets that are set to increase the proportion of HIV prevention services that are being delivered by community-led organizations, and if there have been any milestones developed to strengthen that aspect of the HIV prevention and response. And the scoring, we thought all these are equally contributing to the overall status of where each country is at concerning roadmap action number 5. And then number 6, which speaks to removing social and legal barriers, only 2 components here. First one asking if an HIV prevention strategy clearly identifies and prioritizes addressing legal and policy and structural barriers. And then after that identification, if there are any milestones to address those barriers, waiting, first of all, identifying them, 60%, and then milestones to address them, 40%. So when you see your score, it will depend on what you responded here as a country in terms of these two components. And then the seventh one, promoting integration of HIV prevention into essential related services to improve HIV outcomes. Also, just two components here. The first one, HIV prevention service integration milestones developed. And then if you say they're developed, are the milestones listed? At times, some they'll say yes, and then when they ask, can you list them? And then they are not able to list them. So here, for each milestone that you list, you get a 10% as shown in the comments column there. The eighth roadmap action, which speaks to setting up mechanisms for rapid introduction of new technologies for HIV prevention, as well as program innovations. Also, two components here: defining specific actions to introduce new HIV prevention technologies, also 60%, just like the previous one. And then for each milestone that you mentioned, you get 10% each to add up to 40%. Here, we also really checked the quality of those milestones, because some milestones, they would not really speak to setting up a mechanism for introducing new HIV prevention technologies. We were checking the relevance of those milestones to the roadmap action there in terms of program innovations or introduction of new technologies. And then the ninth roadmap action, which is establishing a real-time HIV prevention program monitoring system with regular reporting, which is a very, very important aspect of the HIV prevention response, speaking to accountability also here and monitoring. So it had four components. If a country has done a data triangulation to determine coverage of programs using the different tools available, if the country has developed subnational scorecards based on the global scorecard tool that we've made, that we've provided, if there's an HIV prevention funding expenditure analysis that is done, and also if cost effectiveness information is being incorporated into or to inform national prevention program reviews. And we thought, first of all, doing a robust data triangulation to determine program coverage would weigh more, as well as conducting HIV prevention funding analysis way more, and then the other components weighing as shown in that third column of scoring. The last one, also with two components, speaks to accountability, aligning with the 2025 HIV prevention roadmap table number 3. So we were asking if the country is putting an accountability framework that is aligned to that 2025 roadmap table number 3, and for each of the accountability element that the country says they have in place, it will score 1%. For the 8 elements in table number 3, you will get 80%. And then if a country has developed one, then it will score for yes, they've developed one, 20% to make it up to 100%. Or if it's being developed, they're in the process of developing one that is aligned to the 2025 prevention roadmap, then it's 10%. So that's all in terms of how we analyze the results. So now with that in mind, I'm showing here in this slide how it looks like, or so that you can understand the results when we share them. This slide is showing, using roadmap action number 2, adopt a precision prevention approach to develop national HIV prevention goals aligned with the 2025 targets. So just showing you those scoring metrics I was showing you in the previous slides, how we use those ones using roadmap action number 2 to do it, and showing for Lesotho, Uganda, and South Africa, so that you understand the next slides, which I'm going to be presenting. So as you noted in the previous slides, this had 6 components. 1, to develop a prevention roadmap or plan. 2, setting granular HIV prevention targets, translating them, the national targets into subnational targets, development of differentiated HIV prevention packages, and also where relevant, packages for adolescent girls and young women, and having standard operating procedures to guide implementation at country level. Those are the 6 elements, and they were weighting as shown in the third column, which says score. So for example, if you look at a country like Lesotho here, they had all these other elements in place, except that they indicated that they didn't have differentiated HIV prevention packages, so they will not get a score around that, and their overall score will be 0.9. You only get a green to show that this is done. That roadmap action item is complete, meaning all the elements are complete if you've got 100% or a total of one of all these scores. If any of those elements are missing, you get a range of orange. If nothing has been done at all, then you get a red, meaning that that action item and its components, nothing has been done yet. If you look at Uganda, for example, the score 0.7, a darker orange there compared to Lesotho, because they indicated that they have not set granular targets for prevention, and also they haven't translated them into subnational targets. And then if you look at South Africa, for example, for this roadmap action item, even more orange, because one of the components, which is the roadmap, they indicated that they have not developed the roadmap, but we are aware that South Africa is developing one now. So that was waiting a bit more, because we thought having a plan in place is very important for these other elements to be put in place. So that's why it will show a darker orange. And also they indicated that differentiated prevention packages were not in place, which I think also confirms that they are developing the roadmap in line with the 2025 roadmap. So this is how all the 10 actions were scored based on the previous slides, which I was showing you in terms of the different components for each action. Now, when you do that analysis and you take this last row here, which says overall score, when you do that for all the countries, you get a table like this for the different roadmap actions shown in the first column, 1 to 10, and countries shown across as columns, and the different colors indicating where each country is at for each and every one of those roadmap actions. Green is a good thing. It shows that roadmap action item and all its components that they've been done. A range of yellow, orange, it shows that something has been done, but it's not yet complete. And red, it shows that roadmap action item, nothing has been done, or none of its components have been done. As we can see here, and maybe to just say, because I know what's happening now, most likely you are busy looking at your country and checking how many reds are there and comparing yourself to the next country that is next to you on the table, or to your neighbor. It's a good thing that this is your reflection of what you think, where you are at. The important thing now, I think, is to think, how can we move these yellows and the reds to green? I think that is the most important thing, and not to worry much about how many reds there are compared to your neighbor. Maybe to think, how can we move the yellows and the oranges and the reds to move towards green, and from which of our neighbors can we learn? We have got green where we have got yellow or orange or red. We can see here from just scanning this table that the bottom two rows, real-time program monitoring and accountability, that's where I think the big issues are. And then roadmap action number 4, which says HIV prevention leadership agencies. Also here, there's some work here to do. And then expanding community-led HIV prevention services. Also, it shows there's quite a lot to do there. And then for the other roadmap action items, it's country dependent, and it also depends on what components we're missing for each and every of the countries that responded to the survey. Now, the next few slides are just counting how many countries said this for each and every roadmap action item. We picked a few questions here to just show you how the picture looks like. For example, this slide is showing for roadmap action 3.3, in which we had questions 3.1 and 3.2, which was saying, does the country have a budgeted or a costed plan to achieve the 2025 HIV prevention targets or roadmap for all relevant priority pillars of prevention, including key populations and other priority populations? 20 countries said yes, they have one, and 12 countries indicated no. And this indicates that for those 12 countries that said no, some work is required. If assistance is required to do so, be more than happy to assist. And then on the right side is the second question under the same roadmap action item, which says, in the past 12 months, has a dialogue been to address gaps in HIV prevention funding gap been held and across the different relevant partners? we see that 25 countries indicate that they've done such a dialogue and 7 said they haven't done. It would be interesting also to know, or even within the working group, what were the outcomes for those who have done so? What were the identified gaps and what were the milestones to address that? And for the 7 that said they haven't done so, what were the challenges to conduct such a dialogue? In the next part of this same roadmap action item, we were interested to see the variety of partners that were involved in this. So this slide is just showing you, and this is a very informing slide and also very informative in terms of highlighting the multi-sectoral nature of the HIV prevention and response at the country level. This slide is showing the partners that were invited in those countries that said, yes, we have conducted a dialogue to address or to discuss HIV funding gap at the country level. The size of the text indicates the frequency of countries saying we have invited that partner to have that dialogue under the leadership of the HIV prevention coordinating entity, which we know it sits either under NACS or under Ministry of Health, depending on the country. That's why we see National AIDS Council and the Ministry of Health, they've got a very big text there. And then of course, we are talking about funding here. We'll see Global Fund and PEPFAR, they will appear big there, meaning that they're being invited in these discussions. And also encouraging to see that countries are involving their ministries of finance or treasury, as it speaks to also discussions around sustainability. And partners like the Bill and Melinda Gates, we see them also appearing in most of the countries, and the different UN agencies and other partners that are supporting the HIV prevention response, we can see them appearing depending on the country and context. This is a very encouraging slide to see this multi-sectoral nature of the response. And then for action number 4, is there a designated HIV prevention leadership entity for multi-sectoral collaboration? Almost all the countries here said yes, it is there. The one country that said no, they're still discussing around joining the GPC. This is a new GPC country. And then the next question was, how often is that coalition or working group meeting? We're trying to use this as a kind of a marker of functionality of that working group. So we can see here, there are quite a number, handful, 6 that said they've never met, another 6, they've met only once in 12 months. And then maybe several, 11 that said they've met 2 or 3 times. And then another few that said they've met 4 or more times. The last question under this was, has the country developed milestones to reinforce HIV prevention leadership entities? So for those ones, are they trying to figure out how to strengthen the functionality of that leadership entity? And we can see that a number of countries are indicating that they haven't done so, and only a few said they've done so. That's some area of work to strengthen. And then for roadmap action number 8, is the country defined specific actions for the adoption of HIV prevention technologies. And we specified some examples here that we also learned even during the COVID time. Vaginal rings, long-acting regimens, HIV self-testing, multi-month dispensing, as well as digital platforms to expand HIV prevention, as program innovations. We can see here varying numbers depending on the innovation here, with the highest number of countries mentioning MMD, which is not surprising, as this was strengthened during COVID, and many countries continued with this, and as well as digital platforms or virtual meeting spaces, and different numbers in terms of long-acting and vaginal rings. And if countries have developed milestones, which is on the right side of the other chart on the right side, more than half, they indicated that they've developed milestones to institute new technologies or program innovations, and quite a handful, 13, they indicated that they haven't developed milestones. So that's an area to strengthen as well. Action number 9, in the past 12 months, has the country reviewed, validated, and triangulated data from different implementers, government, communities, civil society, etc., determine estimated coverage of HIV prevention programs? And please, we were asking here if they can select all the different ones that apply. So there were different options here, whether they've triangulated data from all major implementers for key populations programs to estimate KP coverage. We know there's a huge gap around this area. Triangulated data for all major implementers for adolescent girls and young women to estimate prevention coverage. We know this is a key priority in sub-Saharan Africa. If there's aggregated data for condoms distributed in public, social marketing, and private sector, we also know that there's huge need to revamp our condom program in countries. And then if there's reviewed and validated VMMC data and determined coverage using relevant estimates tools such as DMPPT2, we know this is a huge area around VMMC data as well. And also, if there is aggregated data for all types of pre-exposure prophylaxis for all relevant data and populations, and we know this is also a key area. When you go to different data sources, at times you get different numbers. So a very important area around monitoring PrEP. We can see, quite a number of countries indicated they've done these exercises across the different data sources, but there's still room to improve this aspect. And then the subsequent questions under the same roadmap action item, the first part was asking, has the country HIV prevention scorecard been translated into subnational scorecard 2? Most countries indicated they haven't done so, with a few that have said they've done so. It would be great how these three can, or the 27 can learn from these three that indicated that they've done so. Is the country incorporated assessments of granular expenditures on HIV prevention and funding gap into annual national prevention program reviews in the past 12 months? We also see that most of the countries, they haven't done so. With the info that they've done so, it would be great to see how countries can learn from each other for this aspect. Is the country incorporated cost effectiveness assessments or value for money into annual national prevention program reviews in the past 24 months? Also another area that still needs a lot of strengthening here to make sure that there is value for money in terms of the programs or interventions we select in our programming in the HIV prevention response. The last roadmap action, which is number 10, is the country followed the accountability framework that is table number 3 of the 2025 roadmap. So we're asking countries to select out of those 8 elements, which of those ones each country has followed so far. We can see here, this is a huge area that needs improvement, with most countries not have applied these elements of accountability as indicated in the 2025 HIV prevention roadmap table number 3. First, senior political leadership briefings on HIV prevention, a huge gap there. Annual reviews of political action agenda for HIV prevention, even huge gap. Annual briefings with senior legislators and policymakers to address legal and policy barriers. We also saw, even for this roadmap action item linked to this accountability element, there was a gap there. Annual dialogues on action to address legal and policy barriers, also related to the previous point as well. Even a huge gap on this one, which speaks to annual HIV prevention financing dialogues with senior leadership in health and financing ministries. Annual prevention finance and investment tracking at global and country level, also a huge gap. With quite some number in the last one, which speaks to quarterly programmatic progress tracking, I guess, with the use of different tools like the scorecard tools and other country developed tools to monitor and track HIV prevention program, which saw some encouraging number of countries doing so. And then the last one, is there an accountability framework? So related to the previous point, we can see here that most countries indicated that accountability framework is not in place. Only 5 indicated it is being developed, and 3 indicated that it has been developed. So a huge area of strengthening around accountability here. If you pull all this data into one table, or if you take the other first table that I showed, that heat map table which I showed at the beginning, and then instead of just showing the overall score, you show the score for each and every one of those components under each roadmap action item. This is what you get, what is shown here. And we can see there are some areas with greens, quite a lot of them, which is encouraging, but there's also some areas, many of them, that are orange and red. It's very easy when you look at the bottom of the table here, that real-time program monitoring and accountability, that's a huge area requiring some strengthening there. And then when you look at number 5 and number 4, Number 4, it speaks to prevention leadership entities. And then 5 speaks to community-led HIV prevention services. We can see there are huge gaps there. And then for the other roadmap action items, it depends on country and a specific component that needs to be strengthened or addressed. So this is the overall picture. And the nice thing about this chart is you know exactly that, okay, if we have orange under roadmap action point X, it's because of this component for that. For example, in a country like I'll pick Lesotho, which is the first one on the column here, they got an orange under roadmap action 2, which speaks to precision prevention. And the reason was because they indicated that differentiated HIV prevention packages were not yet defined or developed. So this will be an area which the country will need to work on. Otherwise, all the other components of this roadmap action item for the country, they are all in place except that one. And that's why they got an orange. And if you do that, it is easy for, as a country, to list what are those specific elements under each roadmap action item that needs some strengthening. And then either look for support, could be technical assistance support or any other support that we can get from country or partners of the technical working group of the HIV prevention response in the country to address those gaps. We are going to be administering the same survey, same questionnaire again until the end of the implementation of the 2025 roadmap to see over time how we can turn these reds and orange and yellows into green. I think that's the big task that we all have. If you prefer to look at the same results in the form of a bar chart, maybe in a simpler way, this is what you get. Basically counting how many countries have completed which roadmap action item. We can see where we have got taller orange, yellow, and taller red bars. That's where more work is needed. And it's easy to see if we start from the end of this bar chart towards the far right, we can see real-time program monitoring and accountability for HIV prevention programs. That's where we've got very tall yellow orange bars and taller red bars, and then also integration as well as removing legal and social barriers. And then for prevention leadership as well and community-led services, we have got this very tall orange bars, meaning that there's some work to do there. Where there are a bit taller green bars and shorter yellow, orange, and red bars, it just shows that something is in place, but it needs further strengthening. But it's very clear also from this chart that more work needs to be done. So in conclusion, we can see based on this baseline assessment that more countries are using data, they're adopting people-centered planning for prevention, and they're defining investment needs. More countries are also preparing the ground for new prevention technologies, which is very encouraging. Note that nearly enough is being done on service integration, having an accountability framework, or removing social and legal barriers, as I've already highlighted earlier on. And national institutions to lead coordinated HIV prevention programs, community-led HIV prevention service delivery, and prevention program monitoring systems. These are works in progress and areas for intensified support, as I already highlighted again. This is all I had for now. We have got the PDF extract of each and every country response that we can share. If you need it, just let us know that we want our PDF of what we submitted. It's good to keep track so that when you submit again next year, you know what you submitted before. And we are more than happy to extract your own country analysis of this table just for your own country without the other countries, so that you can use it in your discussions and presentations. That's all I had to say, and thank you so much. I want to acknowledge our NACs and their prevention focal points, Ministry of Health prevention focal points, our UNAIDS and UNFPA country and regional directors and their prevention focal points for really putting a lot of work into working as a working group in country to compile these responses and submitting for each country. Also, to acknowledge other partners within the technical working group in countries that were supporting this exercise. My colleagues here, the GPC Secretariat team, for putting together the questionnaire and helping to think through how to analyze these results, and special mention to Aurea on this space. Also, the prevention working group, which we discussed with preliminary analysis, and they provide provided some insights into how we can analyze this data, as well as the steering committee also provided some input into how we can think through to analyze this data. So thanks to all of you. That's all. So I haven't been able to see the chat function. It's difficult to see when you're presenting, but I'll go through. Feel free if you want to ask a question. Our IT will unmute you and you can speak. In the meantime, I will be checking the chat function. Please indicate by raising your hand, and then I will ask our IT to unmute you, and then we can respond to your question. Any questions or clarity or anything that is not clear? The idea also is to agree on the scoring approach, because we are going to be publishing these results in the GPC report this year. A summary of these results will be included in the report. So yeah. Please indicate by raising hands if you want to speak. I see Ricardo. If Cedric, if you may allow Ricardo to speak, if you may unmute.
Thank you. Can you listen to me? Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Oh, yes. I just got a question in the chat, but as you cannot see it, I will ask directly. In the countries, you pass the questionnaire to different agents. How did you balance different point of view, different agencies, NGOs, government, etc., inside a single country, just to give the qualification result? Thank you.
Thank you, Ricardo. You're speaking, you're referring to that chart that was saying partners invited for the financing dialogue, right?
Pardon me?
Are you referring to the question, the chart that was speaking to the funding dialogue, partners invited to the funding dialogue? Is that...
I don't know exactly how the questionnaire was done. If you pass the questionnaire to Ministry of Health, Global Fund, and different NGOs, or it was an internal dialogue, no? Or...
Oh, okay. Okay, thanks for clarifying your question. So the questionnaire was shared with our UNAIDS and UNFPA country representatives, and they shared the questionnaire with the HIV prevention leadership entity in country. This could be NAC in most countries, and in some countries this sits within the Ministry of Health. And then the government entity responsible for coordinating HIV prevention then consulted the prevention technical working group in the country to compile the responses. This is our understanding of how the process works. So then within that technical working group, all the partners, donors, civil society, and implementing partners would then be contributing their responses to the questionnaire in country, being led by the government prevention leadership entity in country, which is mainly NAC in most countries and MOH in other countries.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ricardo. I see Andre, IT, if you may unmute Andre, and then Josefa Maziwe in that order.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, yeah, my name is Andre. I'm Andre Posteruk, working for UNFPA, regional office for Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. I have one question. I noticed that in your slides, Kazakhstan appears as all red. So I was wondering, I mean, did they respond to the survey at all? Because, you know, Kazakhstan is in fact a leader in HIV response in Central Asia. They have a big commitment of the government for HIV prevention. They've also been recipient of the Global Fund for a long time. So I was quite surprised to see that all action points appear as red, nothing even slightly different color. So if that could be clarified before actually this report goes public, thank you.
Thank you so much, Andre, and thanks for a good eye on that one. It's supposed to be grayed out, not red, because we had not received the survey response from Kazakhstan. They're still discussing the whole GPC joining process. So I was meant to gray it out so that it doesn't show now until when they finished the whole process and submitted their survey response, and then we can unmask their responses. So I'll delete that column. Thanks for a good eye.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then Josepha Mazue, if you can unmute Josepha Mazue.
Okay, thank you. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
As you say, all right, thank you. Josepha Mazue from Mozambique, from NAC. First, I would like to thank for the presentation and for the result of the survey. They were clear and very understandable. How do you score each question that are in the survey? But one of the things that I've noticed, I think I've mentioned it before, it's the way the questions are phrased, or the way we're supposed to answer the question. So it doesn't give us more space or chance to answer, because it's the question takes you mostly for yes or no. Probably if there would be, I don't know how can you put it, like not exactly giving the answer yes, no, because there's answer that could be not really, it has been done, but not, I don't know if you can get me. It's probably one of the things that makes the results becoming mostly red. It's because there's no space, different answers than no. It's for some of the questions that we could see at the survey. And also, thank you if you can share how the results that you had from the summary that you did would be great to see and revise, and so that it would help us next year when we answer the next survey. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josepha. Thanks for that. And yes, I remember this feedback about the questions in one of our prevention calls with you and team. Point well taken. We tried to simplify this question to make it as short as possible and also as easy as possible, and have less text-based responses, because then that will give room to very varying responses that will make it difficult to quality check and to be able to compare across countries. But we have taken your point. What we can do in the subsequent survey, maybe we can for a number of these questions, we can add more text-based questions, that if a country wants to substantiate what they've selected in the multiple choice, maybe add some detail to justify their multiple choice option. There will be room to do that. But point well taken, and also we noted that from our previous bilateral with your country. Thank you. And we will share as well for your second part test. We can share with you the extract of the PDF, and also country-specific analysis with the other countries excluded. We can share with you as well. Thank you. So I'll try to respond to some questions I'm seeing in the Q&A while it's okay. Yes, there is Pierre IT. If you can unmute Pierre, and Mio Suki, in that order. Okay, Pierre, can you unmute Pierre, IT? Pierre, if you can try to speak, you should be able to speak. You're unmuted. Okay, while Pierre is trying to figure out the mic there, maybe we can go to the next one from Myanmar, MOH Myanmar. Can you unmute Mio?
Yes.
Yes, over to you.
Okay, I'm University from the MOH or Myanmar. First of all, I would like to thank you for your excellent presentation. And the results is very related with action point 7. The integration with this got the red color for this action point. So the I don't know the detail, the questionnaire for this action point 7. So I would like to know the which related services are the asked in this for the questionnaire. I mean that which related services are do you mean to include in this the action points? Thank you.
So I missed the first part of your question. Thank you for that. I could hear you asking something to do with integration, but you were breaking. So I missed the other part. Would you mind if you may repeat your question? I know it's about integration, but I missed because your network, I think, it's breaking.
Sorry, that's can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, I would like to know about the integration with the related services, because I noticed that many countries got on the red color for this the action point. So I would like to know which related services are asked for this action point. Because this is related services, I think that it's in general, it may be related with the prevention of the HIV. But the many countries that got the red colors, it's just I would like I am support curious about this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that's a great question, and also related to another question I'm seeing in the Q&A from Namada, one of our colleagues. With regard to integration, we didn't really ask which services. It was up to the countries to self-reflect and say, yes, they're integrating HIV prevention with the related services. We didn't then go ahead to ask which ones are you integrating and how are you integrating. I think as the first line, we just asked if it is happening and if there are any milestones being done to do so. If it is not happening, or if it is happening at a less extent, are there any milestones developed to strengthen that area? That was it was a very basic question, not going into the detail of what were the services that are being integrated and how are they being integrated into what other related services. So we don't have detail of what services by country are they integrating. Maybe that would be another level of quality to assess this roadmap action item. I'm not sure if that answers your question, and also Namada's question on the chat box. And
Okay,
my colleague Clemens also here can also maybe add and clarify. Clemens, if you want to add and clarify around the integration piece as well. Okay. Pierre, if you, I think you should be able to speak. Can you unmute our IT? May you unmute Pierre? Pierre Shamo, you should be able to speak. Your mic is unmuted. Or you can paste it. You can paste it on the chat box if you don't mind pasting your question on the chat box, and then we can respond to it. Any question, anyone who would like to speak or reflect on the presentation? Remember, the idea also is for us to, yes, Michelle Warren, I was looking forward to your question coming. Can you unmute Michelle? Mitch.
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes, Mitch, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you all. And for those who don't know, my name is Mitchell Warren. I'm the executive director of AVAC and also the co-chair of the Global Prevention Coalition, and delighted that so many of you are on the call. I wanted just to make as much a comment. I did put some questions in the Q&A. I think building on some terrific question from Kenneth at HEPS in Uganda, and this issue of how we ensure that these kinds of surveys, which really are so helpful in understanding where we are as a baseline, how we really look to validate those across a range of stakeholders, because in every country, there is terrific leadership from government. Certainly in many of the GPC countries, significant investments from PEPFAR and Global Fund, and their implementing partners. And perhaps most importantly, from our perspective, civil society. And I think it'd be really helpful to hear Lysias Clemens and others how we can ensure that these kinds of surveys are actually casting a wide net, even when different stakeholders have different perspectives and even maybe disagree on whether something is green or orange or red. Getting those conversations at the country level to align of the issues and the priorities, I think, is so important. So it'd be great maybe for the Secretariat to reflect a bit on how we might kind of strengthen some of the accountability measures and the alignment across stakeholders, and really see these surveys as things that are informative, hypothesis generating, not prevention in and of itself. So how it links to actual program delivery. And so just wonder if you all might want to talk a bit about that validation process, and also the issue of where there's green that's actually working, we want to figure out how to help other programs and countries benefit from that, and where it might be in orange or red, how we might identify the appropriate technical support to turn them to green. And again, just wonder if, I know we don't have a lot of time, but if perhaps you all want to give just a little sense of where to from here, so that we can actually not only, it's less about getting these colors to turn to green as much as it is making sure that we drive incidents down. So the connection between these kinds of surveys and actual delivery. So as much comments as questions for the future, but just wanted to flag that here.
Thank you so much, Mitchell. Great question, and I see in the Q&A similar question from a number of civil society organizations here. So it is, I'll answer, and then I'll also give to my colleague Clemens and also Paula to come in. So it is our understanding, or it was our understanding, that civil society will be engaged as part of the technical working group in country. So the questionnaire is shared with our country teams to share it with the government, could be NAC or could be Ministry of Health, the one that is responsible for coordinating HIV prevention response at the country level. And that entity then convenes everyone or shares the questionnaire with everyone to make contributions, so that the submitted country response is reflective of input from all the technical working groups of prevention in that country. That is our understanding. So this could have not been the case maybe across some countries, maybe in some maybe partners were invited, maybe in some, maybe civil society was not engaged. Then I think it's important that this being mentioned in this call. We have time, I think, to allow countries to go back and consult also input from those. We still have the survey online open for countries to make final edits, or for civil society to still reflect on what was submitted and see if it is representative from their perspective of what was done. There will also be, I think, complementary surveys that substantiate this kind of surveys that will be done from a civil society perspective in the form of a shadow reporting, I think. I'll end there and give to my colleague Clemens and also to Paula to add to that. Over.
Thank you so much, Lysias. And if I may just go back to one of the slides that I showed. And as Lysias rightly said, the starting point is the prevention working group, where, you know, the different stakeholders should go and come together to actually discuss survey results. But then from that, the national AIDS coordinating bodies could actually move beyond this small working group and then reach out, as Mitchell said, and make a change to those barriers that are most relevant in the specific country context. And that may be the political leadership. So have an arena to really discuss these results at a political dimension with political leaders, discuss legal barriers with policymakers, as explained before, have a financing platform, a discussion really to discuss a platform to discuss the financing issues, and then the very important implementation issues that in the end will drive down incidents, as Mitchell said, could really be subject to bringing together the stakeholders, and then look at the monitoring data from scorecards, ideally including subnational ones, and look at these survey data and find concrete solutions as part of a national program review process. And having such platforms in place will then also strengthen the movement from projects or specific initiatives to a consolidated national prevention program. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, thanks, Clemens. Paula, do you want to come in on that as well? And another question, there's a question from Dr. Adingra asking, what would the GPC do to assist with roadmap actions 9 and 10? If I may give that to you, Paula, as well.
I think you should keep 9 and 10. My response is going to be quite general. We don't have much time left. So yeah, just to respond also, there are a couple of questions regarding the frequency of the survey, and this survey, like the previous country surveys, is going to be annual. So although it does look like it is cross-sectional, once in a lifetime scoring, what we really hope will happen is by starting where we are, which is a baseline, and this is a roadmap to 2025, that we will generate a wave of green. And the first step to change is doing a situation assessment, which I believe this, as the baseline survey has established. Thank you for the questions on where we're going from here and what these some of these questions actually meant. So one of the challenges with qualitative inquiries is as some of you have pointed out, is how the question is phrased determine the answer. So maybe one of the things that we should, certainly one of the things that we should do as a next step is share the survey questionnaire, because understanding how the responses came back also, it's helpful to have seen how the questions were phrased. Finally, I think the other good suggestion that I've seen is to feed back to the countries individually the survey result, if you want, post the Secretariat having assigned a score. And thank you for asking for that, because that is, that is something that we hadn't done yet and something that we should absolutely do. And what we hope that this does then in the countries, and this is also going back to the question on why were individual civil society stakeholders within the countries, why did they not receive the questionnaire? Our assumption was that they did, because the survey is at the sort of strategic level, but our assumption was that national coalition groups and national AIDS response coordinating bodies do represent, among other stakeholders, do represent civil society organizations, to the extent that that's happening probably differently to different extents within countries. So feeding back the country responses, having assigned the score with some explanation that we've tried to do now on how the scores were generated. What we hope will happen and what we can support as a coalition partnership is dialogues in the country or consultations in the country. This is the score, and this is what the survey result is, and have that looked at and discussed by the targeted national stakeholders. That is. Those were my high-level responses, listening and reading some of the questions in the Q&A. Lycius, what did you want me to address specifically? The questions on accountability and monitoring?
So I think that's okay now, Paula. There's one which I think you might need to just respond to, and colleagues, if you may stay for 3 minutes so that we can close. There's a question asking who is the focal point of the GPC at the high level. So if you may just respond to that. That's the person who was trying to unmute, but we couldn't unmute that person. If you may respond to that, and then we can give to
Elizabeth. To my shame, I do not know how to answer that question. What high level are you referring to?
I'm not sure. I was going to say you are the coordinator from UNAIDS, and there's Elizabeth.
Coordinator from UNAIDS, or coordinator from UNFPA, co-conveners. We've got, we've got the GPC co-chair on the call, the coalition co-chair on the call. So there's several. There's several layers of the GPC, including national coalitions. National coalitions or national technical working groups for HIV prevention. Okay, we do function. The prevention team at UNAIDS headquarters does function as a secretariat for the GPC, but the GPC is a lot broader than that. The membership boasts member states, political and technical levels. The membership boasts international civil society partners, international key population network partners, several varieties of relevant civil society organizations, and so on, and a number of UN agencies who have work allied to HIV prevention. So I forgot to mention the funders, program funders, major program funders and donors. So it's a broad coalition of the willing and interested in the prevention agenda. But if you're asking about the secretariat, the GPC secretariat team sits within the HIV prevention team at UNAIDS. So it's one of the activities that we oversee.
Thank you so much.
I hope that answers your question. It's a difficult one to answer. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Thank you, Paula. I see there's a lot of questions and also a lot of engagement, people seeking clarifications. One quick maybe thing I can say is the survey link is still open for countries to make final edits. It's still also open for countries to still engage their civil society and get contributions and then finalize and provide the final submission, which we can then use for our reporting this year. We will leave it open for the next 2 weeks so that maybe countries can do so. So there's still opportunity for you to make edits and also to engage any stakeholders that might have been left out in this first phase of the response, and then make those adjustments, and then we incorporate them in the final analysis that we will share. We note your point, Caroline, around including other sectors, for example, the programs like Education Plus. I think we'll reach out for how we can find collaboration and strengthening this work on HIV prevention to include those elements as well. I want to give and thank you so much for staying longer than the time. I want to hand over to Elizabeth, who is our co-convener from UNFPA, to give closing remarks. And sorry, Elizabeth, for keeping you waiting for longer. There are so many questions. We'll respond to some of them in the recordings that we'll share. Over.
Yeah, thank you, Lysias and Paula and Clemens. I think it's great presentations. And I think what's even better is that we actually did have a good barrage of questions coming in, people really interested in how the survey is put together and how it is implemented and how the answers come back. So it's really looking at, the devil is in the detail, and that happens everywhere in the HIV response, whether it's this survey or whether it's simply reporting on the global HIV response across the world. So I think we need to look at those different levels of leadership, of stewardship, of accountability. I noted in the survey that, for example, there are not that many milestones at the subnational level. So if we are really going to find those new infections that we are missing and missing the prevention, we really need to go down to the lower levels in each country. The green bars are, as it was said, are excellent opportunities for learning, for South-South collaboration among countries. And I think I very much appreciate some of the inputs on how we can strengthen the questionnaire so that we have better information, even given the challenges with bringing in the qualitative data, but also really ensuring that there was strong representation from civil society, who we know we have tasked in our targets to deliver much of the prevention services across countries. So I think I'm not going to say much more because we are running late, but the survey is important because we need to know where our starting point is. As in any roadmap, you want to know where you're beginning, and you want to know where you need to focus to get to the destination. As Mitchell was saying, was just a good reduction in HIV incidence so that we can hit our targets from the political declaration and the global AIDS strategy. So with that, I really encourage everyone to go back if the survey is still open and look at the answers, perhaps provide more detail if possible, but also look at the results that you were presenting, Lysias, to understand exactly where they are in the implementation of the roadmap so that we can get to the targets that we so dearly need to reach by 2030. So with that, thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Elizabeth. We will share the recordings, we will share the slides, and any question that has not been answered, we'll go through and we'll respond to it in the email that will come with the slides. Thank you so much. Look forward to other webinar series. We'll do another one, I think, on the scorecards when the scorecards are updated this year. So be on the lookout for another invite from the GPC on this week. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you, Lysias.